Hello, everyone, and welcome to HR Bytes, a podcast and video series to bring you stories of HR professionals who bring a think globally and act locally digital HR agenda to their work. Everyday people who are driving digital transformations in their organizations, data-driven and future-fit digital HR leaders. My guest today is Sai Islam. Welcome to the show, Sai. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Wonderful.
Hope you're doing well.
Yes, I am. Thank you for asking. So, Sai, you've been in a variety of roles in human resources for over 10 years now, and you're the co-founder and vice president of consulting with Talent Metrics. In addition, you're also an associate professor at SUNY Farmingdale. And, you do a lot of work in the people analytics field, which is right now what every HR professional wants to learn and know. How has the past year been for you in your function?
Well, much like everybody else, it's been changing. It's ever changing. And, a lot of the things that have happened over the past year in the pandemic, people were predicting, it'll be, in the next 5 years, by 2025, all of these changes are going to happen. And what we've seen now is that, because of the pandemic, it's taken HR tech adoption to a new level. We're all, those of us who can, we're all remote working. Even if you're still working in, a face-to-face customer-facing role, you're using new technology. You're using new devices. Your procedures are all different, and a lot of things that have been kind of coming to the forefront over the last few years have been pushed forward. And so it's been a wild year for without a doubt, and that's what we're seeing out here in the world, is that we're helping a lot of companies kind of grapple with these changes to remote work and the need for people to do it mediated through technology.
Absolutely. And I like the use of the word wild there. It definitely was like the wild, wild west for a while, didn't it? Yeah. It felt like that, certainly. We didn't know what we were doing.
It still feels like it. Yeah.
Yeah, in a way, yes, it still does. Especially if you're traveling across the globe in the midst of this, which I did twice already. It does feel like the wild, wild west. It's a whole new world out there. So, Sai, you have won the Society for Industrial Organizational Psychology's Scientist-Practitioner Presidential Recognition Award, one of the most coveted awards in SIOP. Tell us a little bit about your, journey towards that award and what made them give it to you.
So, funny enough, one of my interns saw they had requested applications for this award or nominations rather. And one of my interns nominated me. I actually didn't nominate myself, and she just did it. And I was lucky enough to get that award. That was an award from a couple of years ago when the president of SIOP, Talia Bauer, she had kind of wanted to bring greater recognition to those who are working in SIOP that are, kind of working between the world of science and the world of HR practice, and kind of bridging that gap. And as you mentioned earlier in my bio, I wear a number of different hats, and each of those hats is kind of informed by science and by practice. And the way that we kind of got through that journey to kind of winning that award was that over the years I have worked really hard to try to make sure that any practice that I'm a part of, that it is at least science-based in some regard. So we read through the research literature whenever we're developing interventions, whenever we're speaking to clients. We try to make sure that what we tell them is rooted in some sort of behavioral science. And that's sort of our commitment, and that's sort of been my training as well. So when I did my PhD in applied organizational psychology, there was a big focus on making sure that the things we talked about, the things we did, were very much rooted in that scientific practice. The hard part, of course, is when you read research articles, you can't always identify how you might use some of the scientific findings in the work that you do. One of our big areas is in talent development and training. And one area which psychologists generally know quite a bit is how people learn and how to assess that type of learning. So that's been a big area of research for us and applied practice. And we've been lucky enough to work with some very large organizations and from some small organizations and helping them to evaluate the efficacy of their talent management programs. And so that's a big reason why I was considered for that award. And then the other part of it is that I've tried to advocate for more evidence-based, more science-based practice whenever possible, whether it's with clients, whether it's with students, whether it's on this podcast. I will say that, hey, everybody, you should use more evidence-based practice, mostly because the way that HR professionals, traditionally, like my actual background, I started working in HR before I started learning anything about science. And a lot of the stuff we talked about was best practice. And you would talk about best practice in a variety of different settings. And best practice is good, but it's not always applicable. And I'll never forget, I talked with a client once where, for some reason, they were very interested in what Zappos was doing with holacracy. And the company was like a manufacturing firm, not like Zappos at all. And I remember asking them, well, why do you think that Zappos is a relevant comparison point for you? And we had a nice conversation where, that idea of best practice, maybe it does work within this organization, but we need to kind of look at the context of your organization and the context of your HR function and see what works and why it works. And that's a big part of what we do at Talent Metrics, is helping organizations figure out what works, why it works, and to kind of measure things year over year to see that kind of improvement.
Well, congratulations on the award, and thank you for giving me the backstory on it. So what do you think has happened to our HR function in these past 10 months? Have you seen a rapid adoption of technology in our function, or, in the client industries that you work with? Have you seen a lot of tech adoption? What's going on?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of tech adoption, and I think a lot of this is just forced by the pandemic. The easiest way to think about this is if you have children in school, right? Anybody here is not really working in HR, but they've got kids, and those kids are now dealing with all the different technology that they have to deal with in this transition. That is the experience that I'm seeing, is that organizations are looking at a variety of different tech options, and they're saying, okay, this looks good, this seems to address a problem that we have, and whether or not they integrate well, or whether people know where to find information, has proven to be a big challenge. You used to be able to take, for example, let's say you were used to looking in a file drawer for information. Now you can't do that anymore. You needed to transmit that information into some digital format so that you can access it. And that's been a huge factor for many of the clients that we have, is they're kind of struggling with that. The other piece, not really a technology-related piece, but still very relevant, is the issue of safety. And some of that is tech-oriented. So there are new safety protocols. Companies are using a lot more e-learning so that they can kind of quickly, push out new safety guidelines, new safety protocols. Those things are changing all the time. And many HR departments are experiencing those changes and facing them pretty consistently.
Absolutely. I've seen that in my consulting work as well, and across the globe, actually, in India as well. There's a lot of the shift towards, working from home, obviously, because of the pandemic, but also the data. How do they get the data? And, mostly, especially in India, there's a lot of paperwork that's involved when it comes to the HR function. So they had to really pivot so quickly, and some of them could not. I mean, they just said, okay, this is only this is how much we can do, and this is what we're going to do, right? They can't do much.
Yeah. So, and if you're stuck with paper, that's and how do you convert all of that? Like, there's only so much scanning we can do, right?
Absolutely, right? And you're in a pandemic. There is no one to help you. No one's going to come out and do anything. You're kind of just stuck, right?
Yeah.
But hopefully now people have realized that digital is the way to go forward, and this digital first agenda is primary to any business's survival in the future of work. You worked with a lot of companies out here on the East Coast and across the United States. What's one piece of advice you have for HR technology professionals who are looking to learn new technology or adopt new technology?
So that's a very interesting question to ask, because it's something that is really important to the work that I do in my own consulting. And that the main question I always ask whenever you're doing any sort of tech adoption, or even if you're planning on adopting a training or any type of intervention, is, does this address the business problem that we have? Right. A lot of times, business decisions, we tend to think business decisions are made in a very pragmatic, financially focused kind of way. But, I've been working in a variety of organizations for, many years. And one thing you notice is that people are still people. They make decisions for all sorts of reasons. Some of them are better than others. And the one core question, especially if you're planning on implementing an HR technology, especially one that you're thinking like, okay, this thing could last beyond the pandemic, this is something we might want to keep up for longer, is, does this actually solve some sort of business need? Does this actually improve the life of the workers? Does it make things easier? One thing that I've often told clients is to think about, repurposing existing technology or fully utilizing technology that they already have. One thing I've always noticed is, I worry that sometimes organizations and HR functions, they end up, purchasing a specific tool that is useful for one particular, particular solution or one particular problem, and they're not going to use it for anything else, but they might already have that particular problem solved in another setting. For example, I was talking to a friend of mine who runs a company. He has an HRIS software, and he was asking me about developing a performance management tool. And my first response to him was, well, what does your HRIS already offer? Right? Why build a new tool if there's already something inside of your current technology that you can use? And the conversation we had about that is sort of, reminded me a lot of how we tend to think about our cell phones. Like, our cell phones can do so much, but we probably get 25% of utilization from the tools that we have in the phone itself. We don't want to have that sort of utilization when it comes to HR technology. And for any clients that we work with, I always like to tell those clients, be tough on us. Let us know, if we can do more, if there's something else that you need, we're happy to provide that. And I would suggest to any HR vendor or HR department, before you reach out to a new vendor, see what your existing vendor can do for you.
Absolutely. It's like that, I always use this Swiss Army knife analogy. We never use all parts of the Swiss Army knife. We only use the knife. We don't use the corkscrew. We don't use the tweezers, none of that. But we carry it around with us because it comes with the knife, right? And we're like,
absolutely.
It's just that with our technology too, we buy this entire big legacy system. We only use maybe half a module, and the rest of it is just left lying there, and we can't get rid of it because we've invested so much money into it, right? And we can't move with it. We can't scale up with it. So, great advice.
That is also a problem. Yeah, absolutely. And so if you've already, especially if there's some sunk cost associated with that technology, you're better off just thinking about, well, what can I do with this thing? How can I maximize it? What else can it provide me that I may be able to address? And I've never met a vendor that didn't want to sell an add-on. So there's never going to be a time where they're going to be like, no, I don't want to think about this potential add-on for what you want to do. And in other cases, you might find that there's a smaller vendor that's providing exactly what you need, and then the add-on becomes important. So, going back to that business problem and making sure you're addressing it, very, very important.
Absolutely. And you've done a lot of work with data. Of course, your primary area is people analytics, and there is a sub area of that, and where there's a sentiment analysis involved. Where that's how you and I met, actually. And chatbots nowadays are trying to analyze sentiments by reading all the data, anonymous data, of course. Tell us a little bit about that technology and how that's working for HR.
So HR is trying to use this primarily. My experience has been in the employee engagement space. So what HR departments sometimes request of us is we'll run an engagement survey for them, and we'll ask them, we'll basically analyze the data for common comments, and then we'll analyze it for positive and negative wording. So this varies from organization to organization. because language is different from organization to organization. So certain terminology, certain language that we talk about, that we use in one setting is not necessarily, considered positive or negative in another setting, right? So if you think about different catchphrases or different acronyms that might get used within your organization, especially in HR, for example, something like COBRA, right? COBRA for HR is just pretty normal, fairly neutral term. But in any other context, that's a very scary word. So
not only in America, but if you use it globally, right? There's no COBRA outside of America.
That's right. So cross-cultural issues also very, very important, right? Yeah. I always laugh about this because the word pants in the UK refers to something very different than what it does in the USA, right? So you got to be careful when you talk about that. And so when we do sentiment analysis, one of the things we ask companies to help us with is to generate a dictionary. So we ask them, tell us what words you use, let us know whether or not they're positive or negative, and if there's any unique jargon, please tell us what that is. And so we analyze phrases and comments, usually in survey data around that. Sometimes we will also use social media data to analyze what people are saying about an organization or a company. And in some cases, we'll kind of score the data and we'll say, here's how much positivity there is in it, here's how much negativity there is within your organization, in addition to providing traditional engagement survey metrics. What some organizations are trying to do with chatbots is, they're trying to make the process a little bit more efficient, and they're trying to remove some common questions from an HR professional's plate. So it's sort of like an FAQ page, but it's, okay, the chatbot knows that there are common questions about filling out, about eligibility, signing up for benefits. Here, I can answer the following questions for you. In terms of sentiment analysis, sometimes organizations will also, they will, look at how people are talking about projects within, project management software, or, they'll look at performance appraisals, and they'll look at the kind of language that gets used to describe employees or supervisors to identify talent. And there's a variety of different applications to sentiment analysis. The really important thing to do is, of course, to define what terms are important and be careful about how you're using that technology. There was some concern last year when Microsoft announced that they had they have a new analytics tool called My Analytics that they released middle of last year, which allows employees to kind of figure out their own working schedules and working habits. Prior to that, they had mentioned that they were thinking about letting organizations identify how engaged employees were based on email frequency and language that was used. And that might be a little bit on the edge of creepy. And so there was some pushback about that. And I don't know when Microsoft is going to release something like that, but that's also a possibility. I wrote a little blog post about that idea. And if you're going to be evaluating what people are writing, you really should tell them that you're going to do it and what it'll be used for. And it's better to have targeted data that asks about a specific thing, even in the written word, rather than just looking at large amounts of text. It's harder to parse, and it's harder to figure out what some of it means. And it's also important to look at it over time. So people's attitudes change over time. I mean, if you look at our COVID experience, if we compared people's engagement in February of 2020 to, June or even March 2020, it would be very, very different. And we would see some really different sentiment in there. So always targeted whenever possible.
And the AI for good movement definitely throws some of this logic for a loop, right? Where you can't use this data without really getting consent and without really like you said, directing it to a particular audience and a particular topic. And that's probably the best way to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a couple of really great researchers. Ruha Benjamin is one. She did a talk about AI and the way that AI can actually make power dynamics worse. So, for example, if an organization views its leaders primarily in male terms, then you may not get as many female leaders. And then Dr. Raman Chaudhary from Accenture also talks a lot about AI ethics, which is really important. A lot of times organizations and HR professionals, we tend to think about a computer or a device as being objective, right? But any of those tools, they're not objective because a human built it, right? Even the most advanced algorithm, a person wrote it. So one thing that we see occasionally, and there's been a lot of research on this, that if you're using sort of sentiment analysis or doing text mining and using that to do, like, let's say, screening resumes, if you're not careful, sometimes strange sounding names end up counting against an applicant and can inadvertently remove them from a selection process. And that's not something that you necessarily want, both from a legal perspective and from a talent loss perspective.
Absolutely. And I get a lot of questions from applicants about what kind of bots are reading their resumes and how are they going to get selected. And, there's a lot of apprehension around bots and resume reading, right? What advice do you have for applicants who are wary about bots reading their resumes?
Well, the reality is that a bot may not be reading it, but what might happen is your resume might get scored by an algorithm that's looking for a particular word, particular language. There isn't a whole lot that that can be done unless you really find out what the algorithm's doing. But what you can do, and one thing I suggest to anybody that's applying to jobs now, is it's best to mirror the language of the job description. So whatever the language is that's in the job description, you need to make sure that you use some version of that language, and that you also address every point so that you can show that, yes, I'm capable of doing, X, Y, or Z, and I'm going to use the same language to illustrate that. It means that sometimes you're not going to be able to do a lot of volume applications. So for example, like, I just sent my resume to like 100 places. But the problem with that one resume is that it's not tailored to a specific job. And one thing that this kind of, forces applicants to do a little bit is to maybe be a little pickier about what jobs they're going to apply to. One thing that I've noticed about, the LinkedIn and Indeedification of job search is that it's so easy to apply for positions. It's so fast that you can kind of lose the customized aspect of, the resume and the cover letter. And so if you're really interested in a job, take the time to mirror the language that you see in the job description. And I believe that those bots, the scoring algorithms, will be a little kinder to you in that process.
Wonderful advice. On the flip side of it, what advice do you have for recruiters who are programming these algorithms to go through thousands of resumes? How do you think they should be going about programming the algorithm?
So my suggestion to any recruiters is to really know what it is that you want in the job. And that means, doing a job analysis, getting your HR professional to help you to have a job analysis, or at the very least, competency model, so that you know what you're actually looking for. One of the challenges for recruiters, and I was a recruiter for a number of years when I started my career. I think a lot of people that this is what I tell my students.
That's how you started.
Yeah, it's like we have all these resumes. Please read them. Pick the ones you want to apply for, right? So these are the types of things that many recruiters are faced with, and they're faced with staffing like a variety of positions, and they may not know. And this is why when organizations put out job requisitions, when they're thinking about hiring somebody, they should at least have a solid job description. One of the things I've noticed in job descriptions is either they're much too vague, they're really broad. Like the job description could just read, "We'd like somebody good." Would you like somebody good? Okay. Or they're much too specific. And one of the other big challenges is getting the number of years of experience right. Many organizations, especially in a down economy, will push for higher years of experience because they feel like, we can steal some talent and get somebody more experienced. One of the things we know from looking at some of the research is that years of experience doesn't necessarily correlate to better performance.
Exactly. Or expertise, right? Someone had this meme, number of years of experience does not equal experience or expertise. Does not.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And so, I could have been in a job for a long time. It doesn't mean I was doing a great job at it. So,
Absolutely.
so setting those guidelines so that you know what you're actually looking for, and actually weighting the criteria. So a lot of recruiters, when we're, using HR technology, the tech person, whoever's setting those algorithms, they depend on you, or better yet, actual employees that are working in that position to provide you with input about what is the most valuable thing in this job. What is it that we really need somebody to do? And that's where the job analysis competency model process is really important, because it tells the HR professional, from not just from what they might imagine or what they might think about a job, but from an actual subject matter expert, here's what the job looks like, here's what we need. And then you can actually start to look for that in a resume. The other thing to remember is that any algorithm that you're using to do resume screening, it's only one tool. And so even after you do that first cut from those, however many thousands of applicants or hundreds of applicants, you still need to make a decision from among those folks that are left. And having a solid structured interview and maybe some objective assessments can really help you to make a better decision. And there are enough interview technologies out there and other types of technologies out there that can make that process faster. And that's really important for HR pros to really understand what is in this job and what is it that they need to do. I know that for recruiters, that sometimes sounds like a big ask, because they're overworked as it is. Especially, I was just talking to somebody that's working in healthcare recruitment. It's a very, very difficult job right now. But if you want to make the process move more smoothly, investing a little time into that process, into the pre-work, will make it much easier. The way that I like to think about it, and it's funny I'm using this analogy because I'm not a good cook, but if you think about a recipe, right, you need to set the guidelines for what are the ingredients, what do I need before I even go to the store. So I have to make that list first, even if I'm just like, oh, I'll figure it out when I'm at the store. But when you're at the store, you're going to look at all sorts of different things. You say, oh, that looks good. Maybe I'll throw a little bit of this in. But if you made that list first, it makes the process much easier.
Absolutely. I'm sure you'll make a good prep cook or sous chef.
Sous chef. I'm just good at chopping things. Just ask my wife. She's just like, oh, just chop these things and leave them here.
That's what my husband says too. So awesome. So now that brings us to the fun part of our conversation. Not that this was fun till now. It was. I'm geeked out. So rapid fire. Ready?
Okay, sure.
Okay. Who is one person that you've gained in your network in the past year that you think everyone should know in HR technology?
So there are actually two people that I think would be great to know. The first is Dr. Arti Shyam-Sundar, who's an IO person from India. She's wonderful. She's really great, really a big expert in the DEI space. She's big on Twitter. You can find her there, and she's very, very bright. And I've known her a little bit longer than a year, but I really connected with her recently. And then the second person is somebody local to me on Long Island. Her name is Shandy Arroyo, and she is, the education director at Stony Brook University, Medical Center. She does great work there. I've been volunteering with her a little bit with the Association for Talent Development. She's a really great expert, very bright, and totally worth, following on social media.
And we'll link their accounts in the show notes for the audience. Thank you. What's your favorite HR podcast?
Besides this one, let's see. So there are two actually that I can think of off the top of my head. One is the Indigo podcast, which is Dr. Ben Barron and a couple of other folks talking about science-based practice and evidence-based practice. Really exciting podcast, very helpful to me. I get to hear a lot about other industry professionals and what they're doing. And then the second podcast is the Department 12 podcast, which I like because there are a lot of different areas of HR and IO psychology that get talked about. There was a recent episode that Dr. Ben Butina hosted that was about NASA and culture change at NASA. And, it's not really a common area that we think about, but it's really cool. And as a huge nerd, learning about NASA is great.
Absolutely. I'd love to listen to that one. Thank you. What's your favorite LinkedIn Learning or e-learning webinar about HR tech that you think everyone in HR should really watch and learn from?
And so I think my favorite one is one that's relatively recent. I think it's been around for maybe a couple of years now. Is Chris Rainey has an HR leaders podcast that he runs through his LinkedIn page, and I think that's a really helpful one. He gets some great people to come out and talk about some great issues in HR technology and HR analytics.
Yep, love Chris Rainey and the HR Leaders podcast. I think he's based out of the UK. So
Yeah, he is.
Okay. Wonderful. We'll link the account in the show notes as well. So given the upheaval of all things work and life, what's one workplace trend other than the Zoom shirt that you think is here to stay?
I think flexible scheduling. I don't know if you remember this. Maybe I'm showing my age, but I've been working long enough to know that many organizations have sort of talked about, flexible schedules, remote working. That seems like a nice idea, and I think that is permanent. That's not going to change. That if you have the option, maybe you won't go back. Maybe it won't be like it is now, where we're at home and we have to stay at home. But I think the option will be there, and I think people's work schedules are going to change significantly because of that, especially now that you can work remotely, you can work from home, you can work on your own schedule. What you might see is more synchronous work across time zones as well. So if I'm working with somebody in India or China or the UK, I can now say, well, my work schedule looks like this, and I can build my family life around that, and we can kind of build around that, and we can kind of create a new workflow. So I think that'll be the thing that'll stick around for good.
Absolutely. And I know that you give back to the community and the HR community in a number of ways. And congratulations on being recognized by SUNY Farmingdale, I think yesterday or today, for your contribution to the student professional development and project development at the university. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And how else do you give back to the HR community?
Well, I do a lot of volunteering with the Association for Talent Development, and I do a lot of speaking with SHRM chapters. So I have an upcoming talk in June with Central New Jersey SHRM. I don't know if I'm supposed to announce this now, but SHRM New York City, I'll be doing a little talk with them for their conference in April. So I'm pretty easy. You tell me a place and a time, and I'll show up, and I'll be happy to talk about evidence-based practice and analytics. And I think I also spend a lot of time, volunteering and helping to get people, the right kinds of experts out there who can speak to using evidence-based practice. I think it's a really important thing to do, because especially for HR professionals, in your training. So before I went all data, I did an MBA in human resource management, and it was way before I did a PhD. And I know what HR, traditional HR training looks like. And you get a little taste of data, but it can be intimidating, along with all the other things that you're responsible for as an HR professional, from employee relations to compensation and benefits to just day to day getting through paperwork or even immigration. There's a lot. And so asking now, HR professionals to say, hey, in addition to that, we'd like you to learn some statistics. It might seem like a lot. And so one of the things that I like to do is I want to make sure that HR pros feel comfortable and confident that they know at least what to look for. They don't need to be able to run all the analytics, but they do need to know enough that they can identify a good vendor and somebody that can actually help their organization to grow and to help their employees.
Well, thank you so much for all the work that you do in the community, and the HR community is ever so grateful for what you do. I am really grateful that you are out there helping us, and I've always learned from you. So thank you for everything you do. And
thank you so much.
Of course, and thank you so much for being here today. If our audience would like to connect with you online, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. That's one way. I waste an enormous amount of time on Twitter. So my Twitter is @IOSciIslam, and I'm sure we can include that in the show notes. You can always reach out to me there. And I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. Happy to talk to to anybody about this. I don't know if everybody can tell, I'm a big nerd, so I'm very passionate about all this stuff, and I really enjoy talking about this with anybody because it's important, because when we learn to use data effectively and when we actually implement, core HR practice, we can really create a much more effective, healthy, and fair work culture and work world.
And on that note, I'm totally geeked out. Thank you for joining me today, Sai. And audience, if you'd like to connect with Sai, please do. He is awesome and wonderful to connect with. And thank you for tuning in today. I look forward to bringing you more such global stories of HR tech professionals